Hello, welcome back to the Caring Conversation studio, live from the Care Show at the Birmingham NEC. So we have our first interviewee conversation. Lovely. Is your mic working? No, I think your mic's not working, so we'll swap out for a different one and try that. How about that one?
That's working a little bit better, thank you very much.
There we go. Right, we're true professionals here, I promise.
Exactly, true professionals and the first of the day, that's the challenge.
And you've got your video team here filming us, making mistakes live on stream, so, it's all good, Right, so do you want to introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what you do?
James Maynard, Product Marketing Director at the Access Group in our Health Support and Care Division.
Perfect. So, I think we've got a range of subjects to cover, but I think technology and well-being is really important. I think a lot of companies really miss the basics. When you recruit someone, do you get their contract to them in a timely manner? Do you get all the paperwork that they need sorted? Do you get those bits and pieces? And then going further than that, obviously technology enables those HR basics to be done. If you don't have that good foundation of technology in your company, how are you going to raise above? So you want to talk a bit about sort of technology and well-being and how that works from your perspective?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think for me, what's really key is that no matter what stage, whether you say through HR, screening, onboarding, right through to actually day-to-day usage of that technology, it needs to be complementary to the care provider and the carer themselves. So too often we see that these dispersed systems require you to have 3, 4, 5 different mobiles connected to different systems, logging in different ways, and that is not really complementing, it's just creating more confusion. And actually to support that well-being, it's about how do we make that as easy as possible for carers and care providers to use the latest technologies.
Obviously, as technology provider and as a company that works with technology all the time, it's built into our systems and processes. But if you come into a care home, for example, that is still using paper-based, I mean, it shouldn't be now, but there's a sense of simplicity in that, isn't there? So, how do you help companies make that technology as simple as possible?
So I think there's two pieces to this. So for years we've talked about digital transformation, especially those organisations that are still paper-based that are going digital. But I think there's a piece that's related to digital transformation, but also operational transformation. So they need to go together, and you can't look at those in silos or in isolation. So those two things need to happen together, because the whole operating model and the individuals and the way in which they engage will change as part of that. And as we know, change management is always something that needs a lot more careful consideration and planning in order to bring through.
Yeah. So from the perspective of sort of, say, policy and regulation, how can technology help with stuff like that?
So I think surfacing policies quickly and easily, ensuring that they're well read. So I think making those easily accessible to the carer, the care provider at the right time on the right device. So let's make it as easy for them to consume as possible. And then let's feed that well-read regulation compliance through to the compliance products to use that as evidence when engaging with the CQC. So we need to make that seamless and connected as possible. And I think for me that's the key piece, is how do we begin to connect each of these dispersed siloed systems into something that truly adds value and supports the well-being of the individual, but also the effectiveness of the provider themselves.
I guess at the same time, keeping it super simple, making sure that the technology, again, I find even in my organisation, if we use something that's a couple more steps complicated than it used to be, it's really difficult to get the team to adopt the new technology, even with a fairly technology-based system. If you move from a Google Sheet to an app, you really have to manage that process, right?
Yeah, no, and I think this is where we always need to consider the technology that's available at the time. So you'll hear a lot of noise around things like AI, which has its own challenges about how we adopt it and ensuring that those instances are private and you can engage with things in the right way, especially when we talk about sensitive health data. But actually, we shouldn't be considering that as a product at all. It's a capability that should sit over the top of all of your products and allow you to use natural conversation to engage with multiple products at the same time. So surfacing that data, that information within one system. So let's not overcomplicate it and have AI across 6, 7 different systems. Let's use it as the aggregating tool to pull all of that information up and surface it in a ready way for you.
Well, I mean, you said the word AI.
Yeah.
Is there, have you got any good examples of use of AI? You know, I can, like you said, it can be used for a lot of things. I don't know, is it useful to say prompting people when they're writing notes and care plans about what happens? So, yeah, how are you seeing it adopted?
So I think we need to consider it in a few different ways. So firstly, how do you use generative AI to drive efficiencies? That could just be writing a letter. It could be your Excel formulas, for example. That all will create efficiencies in the day-to-day jobs that you're doing. I think generating feeds from multiple products, using AI to bring those feeds through and surface the things you need to do, again, it drives a greater efficiency. But I think that generative AI piece, when you can interact and say to it, okay, create me a letter referencing my policy documents, or how many times have I used agency staff in the last 12 months when I had people available to roster, and based on the payroll information that sits within my various systems, then you begin to get insights pulling from multiple systems that you wouldn't otherwise have had. And I think that's when it becomes really powerful to either drive basic kind of back office efficiencies, or to give greater insight in a natural language way that we've not had before.
I mean, you know, talking about, say, the future of the workforce, it's quite interesting. So my son's 9, and he uses AI. He'll say, have you ever thought about a pigeon eating a pie? And he'll just make an AI image of it. He just knows how to do it. He goes on, searches it, he knows how to do it. You know, when he's 25, 30, that will just be a completely normal thing for him to do, to use AI to assist him with his work in whatever way possible. Yeah, how do you see that kind of future workforce, you know, dealing with that type of thing?
So we're trying to bring forward AI as in Access Evo is what we call it. But I think it's like all of these things, there are a moment in time, and there are certain technologies that create moments in time which you cannot go back from, and you must engage with and adopt and drive forward. And I think there's still work required with an AI, 100%. But I think actually you look at things like Apple coming to market or the Google search engine. I think Google versus Yahoo, we don't hear Yahoo anymore, and that's because someone made a bet and someone didn't. So I think there are certain technologies that really transform the way in which we work and operate, and AI is one of those. I don't think we saw generative AI coming in as fast as it has, and I think there's still an awful lot of machine learning out there, but that adds massive value in its own right through automation, etc. It's one of those things we need to carefully have a level of guidance around to ensure that we protect data that everybody has. It's every care provider's most valuable asset, their data, so let's make sure we protect it. But if they can utilise that in a clear and easy way, then that will drive massive value ultimately for them as well.
Have you got any kind of just tips or hints for a carer or a care manager about how they might use technology better or something like that? Is there just a kind of, have you got a top tip for someone working in the care sector?
Top tip from a technology perspective, that's an interesting one. I think
make sure the device is up to date or something.
Yeah,
right?
Make sure security and software is always up to date on your device. But I think not to be scared, because I think a lot of times new technologies, it's like, what am I going to break when I try this or what have you? I think almost all of these technologies, you can roll it back. You can go back to a previous version. It's have a go. I think, and that's what drives the greater levels of adoption of all of these technologies, is just having a go. Have a play with safe data, obviously not with patient data, but have a play with these technologies and see what it can do. And I think then you'll begin to get that familiarity, and that's where the efficiencies ultimately will come from.
Yeah, ultimately these things are quite difficult to actually break, right? Like you can mess about with it quite a bit before you go too far. So
as you said, yeah. Your 9-year-old's playing with it, and my 10-year-old's playing with it. Yeah. So we if they can play with it, they're playing with it without any hesitation, and that's where the value comes.
Have you got anything else you'd like to share? Any sort of points or things from Access Group side?
So I think for me, it's around delivering care connected. I think when we look at, we've talked about AI and we talked about machine learning and all these other things, but everything is run on data. So data is the most valuable asset that all of the care organisations have. and their ability to work with that effectively is going to be key. So common data models for data so that you can interact with systems from us, but also systems from other organisations. They need to be interoperable in order to pull that data through and be able to surface it effectively. So I think we're moving away from excellent point-based solutions in the care sector to really being able to integrate those systems together, and that ultimately is going to deliver better patient outcomes, and higher quality care and more compliant care, because we can service that evidence far more quickly, and it becomes personalised. When we think about things like technology-enabled care, if you can begin to feed through technology-enabled care into the way in which you roster, the way in which you plan care visits, and we move to, you talked about retired living at the beginning, actually, how do we begin to apply these technologies in a preventative nature rather than a reactive nature? And actually, that technology is there allowing us to do that.
I mean, I've heard stories along the lines of in care homes, the residents complaining about the Wi-Fi not working properly, which is not something 5 years ago you would have heard about, but now the residents are in there posting on Facebook, getting involved and things like that. So, even simple things like that can be, really effective for just someone having a nice time, right?
I think there's a generational shift as well. I think if we think that people now moving into retired living have grown up with Fitbits and step counters, and probably Apple Watches or another kind of device. So they are already accepting, and I think it's always that decision. I quite often get asked on stage, well, people don't want to be tracked by their wearable, but they're quite happy to be tracked by their phone because the value outweighs the risk that they assume. So with having that generation now coming through that are already using wearable devices and have an expectation of Alexas and all of those kind of things within their homes, then actually that adoption of technology is far easier. We don't have that barrier to go through, and there's a level of expectation that care providers will have those services available, as you say, high-speed broadband access within their organisation.
Perfect. Well, thank you for coming. Nice to meet you.
And
thank you. And we'll hope you have a good show, and we'll see you soon.
Fabulous. Thank you very much.
Right, we'll be back shortly to speak to Derek. Thank you very much.